Welcome to Reporters on France 24. I'm Stephen Carroll. In this edition, the protest against the plan to bury nuclear waste here in France. The authorities want to stockpile the most dangerous waste in a special site 500 metres underground. They say the location in eastern France has the right kind of rock, dating back to the Jurassic period, to enable safe storage for the next 100,000 years. People who grew up in the area near the village of Bure are not impressed. They see not only the destruction of their local forest, but also a threat to the safety of their soil. They're raising questions over how the scientists can be so sure their underground nuclear dustbin would remain sealed and safe. The nuclear waste plan is well underway, and so is the anti-nuclear protest. Jonathan Walsh went to assess both sides in a very heated argument.
For me, it's a wall of shame. Without authorization, nothing. They've given themselves permission to wall off the forest I've known since childhood. No, I can't accept that.
All this territory is offered in terms of economic development has come to a garbage bin for hundreds of thousands of years. We refuse that. What's happening is that young people from all over France have mobilized and decided that we can do something.
The nuclear industry wants to bury its most hazardous waste beneath their feet. But first, these trees have to go. Standing up against the fall of the forest, activists have occupied the woods. In the summer of 2016, a French court declares the clearing of the land illegal. The walled-off site is stormed, a setback for ANDRA, the National Agency for Disposal of Nuclear Waste, and a mark of progress for anti-nuclear campaigners. They've since dug their feet into the leisure forest to preserve the very soil that ANDRA wants to dig up.
Call your dog.
Most activists won't show their face on camera. GASPARD is carrying their message.
The forest is occupied by several dozen protesters. There are huts and trees and shacks on the ground. We are opposing the nuclear waste project CGO.
A few kilometers away, ANDRA has deployed an army of scientists 500 meters beneath the surface of Bure in eastern France. They're on a mission to determine how to build a nuclear tomb that will stand the test of time. We're taken on a tour of their underground laboratory.
You are currently in the biggest gallery dug into the laboratory. The gallery is around 9 meters in diameter. It was excavated by the tunnel boring machine that you see at the bottom there.
It took more than 15 years to construct this 1,600-meter network, full of sensors and measuring instruments. ANDRA scientists are studying the sustainability of clay formations here to determine the suitability of the site as a deep repository for radioactive waste.
For the stockpiles of nuclear waste, simply put, the principal enemy is water. 130 to 150 meters underground, there is no water circulation. It's because the strata is made up of sedimentary rock that has been deposited very slowly over millions of years. And so there are no cracks, no fractures in this particular area of more than 200 kilometers square.
What are high-level wastes, or HLWs? They're the most deadly and long-lasting radionuclides produced by nuclear reactors. And while high-level wastes represent a tiny fraction of the total waste volume, they account for over 95% of the total radioactivity. To prepare the material for transport, they will be vitrified and sealed in stainless steel cylinders.
Here you're in front of a reproduction of the case that will be used to store radioactive material. Obviously, this here doesn't contain any waste. Otherwise, I couldn't stand next to it, and neither could you. The future CGO project will use robots to put the cases in the tubes that we are currently testing and recover them a century later if needed.
The law requires that the waste should be removable if necessary. After a century of packing the site, it will become a gigantic clay coffin designed to withstand the elements for at least 100,000 years. Corinne Francois has been against the project since it launched. She believes CIGEO is a disaster waiting to happen.
An underground structure, over such long periods of time, how can we be sure it will not move? That there will be no earthquakes, no faults? That it will remain watertight? The containers of waste will degrade. Some of us say that they should be stored on the surface at production sites so we don't forget them. Perhaps one day science will advance to the point that they'll be able to get to the bottom of the problem of radioactivity, maybe even neutralize it.
For now, high-level waste is mostly kept at a reprocessing plant in La Hague. The parcels to be sent to Bure are manufactured here. However, storing them at La Hague indefinitely is out of the question. To understand why, we go to another national surface facility. An employee measures the radioactivity levels of the newly delivered waste parcels.
We have to act quickly and efficiently. We must act fast to avoid exposing ourselves to too great a dose, but we have to do it well to check all of our parameters.
Taking every precaution is an obvious necessity, even if this is short-lived waste. Protective gear, tools, ventilation filters and equipment used in power stations are among the contaminated items. These concrete containers will be stored in a large structure. Once it's been packed to capacity, it will be filled and covered with a watertight seal.
In a few years, the waste will be covered by a casing of clay with a layer of green earth. When the entire site's been exploited and it's reached its capacity of waste storage, around 1 million cubic meters, we'll only see large grass domes.
The site will need to be monitored for 300 years after the operation concludes. Andra says it will keep up its commitment. However, this structure is not ideal for long-term storage of high-level waste.
Radioactive waste could last hundreds of thousands of years. It's not conceivable to store it on the surface. Over time, with this type of material, it will face phenomena like erosion. The earth will wear out and diminish. If dumped on the surface, the waste could potentially be exposed if covered with just a few meters of earth.
Heading back to Bure, the CIGEO project is expected to get an authorization decree in 2018. If it wins final approval from the French government, from 2030, it will be the final resting place for the most hazardous waste in history.
A little further and we'll arrive at a junction that will take us in the direction of the area designated to receive waste, near the current laboratory.
Francis and his son Nicholas are farmers in Bure. They take us along the route of a future railway line that will be used to transport the waste. The land already belongs to Andra. While they're neither for or against the project, they've been following its progress closely. As a member of the council, Francis voted in favor of the scheme in the 90s.
I take responsibility for my choice. I voted yes for the laboratory. I was about 51% in favor and 49% against, or undecided. Today, 15 years later, my vote is still split both ways. My confidence in science remains steadfast, but there's always that element of the unknown.
Around 90 people call the village of Bure home. Since 2016, the once sleepy town has been uprooted by violent protests. Last February, anti-nuclear militants clashed with police at the gates of Andra. The movement is seen as increasingly politicized and drawing younger recruits. Seasoned activists are also joining the ranks. Relations between activists and locals is growing tense.
The protests are becoming more determined, even violent at times. Not physical, but verbal. Some are posing threats. Demonstrators have the right to take a stand in a way that's democratic and intelligent.
They are taking a stand more so against the state and the system than against CGO.
This building, purchased by activists in the heart of the village, has become their headquarters. We're not allowed to film inside. In the garden, we find Corinne, Francois and Paul, who lives here. His face is hidden behind an owl mask to protect his identity. It's also an emblem of the movement.
Le seul moyen d'arrêter ce chantier.
The only way to stop this project is by force, to be a physical opposition. There are many people that have settled in the territory, that have bought houses around here or renting properties in the area. I think that it's going to open up a dialogue and facilitate exchanges that are less militant than they've been, allowing us also to talk with the people.
When more violent actions occur, I ask myself, where does this violence come from? This nuclear waste disposal project was imposed on us. It will destroy our lives. For years, millions of euros have been dumped, and today the regions of Meuse and Haute-Marne are given 30 million euros each. That's already 60 million euros. And there's not a shred of radioactive waste here. They're literally buying people.
Despite mounting opposition, work on the site continues. In France, as in Finland or Sweden, deep underground disposal is considered the safest and least expensive solution for nuclear waste management.
This waste exists. We could think about stopping producing this waste, but that's another question. So we have to find a solution. More than 20 options to store it have been offered on a global level. The international community reflected on all these options and found that the geological storage in adequate layers was the best option. And here we have the adequate layers.
The agency has acquired almost 3,000 hectares around Bure. ANDRA often pay more than the value of the land. But the activists in and around the forests of Lujac aren't backing down.
We've focused our message and our action against the burying of nuclear waste, but our fight is against nuclear material in general. We're here to block the nuclear sector and challenge what they're trying to sell us as a solution.
The woods were signed over to ANDRA by a village near Bure. The transfer was successfully blocked due to an administrative fault on the part of the municipal council.
It's beautiful. It's been forever since I've been up here.
An upcoming vote will determine its fate.
It's the best spot in the forest.
ANDRA hopes the site, branded the underground Chernobyl by critics, will get back on course. For their part, anti-nuclear militants are already gearing up for demonstrations this summer.
Well, France 24 reporter Jonathan Walsh is with me here in studio. Jonathan, is there any other option in this case than burying this nuclear waste underground?
Well, many other options have been studied by scientists over the past decades. For example, they thought of sending nuclear waste on space rockets in space, or to put them in volcanoes. But all these options were in the end abandoned. And it seems that right now deep storage is the options that the scientific community wants to keep, and this is true in many other countries. For example, Sweden or Finland, they're also working on the same type of project.
Nuclear power is an issue that's being debated in many European countries. We know that Germany has decided to phase out all of its nuclear power. In this case, the protesters that you're speaking to, are they against just this plan or burying nuclear waste and the nuclear industry in general?
Clearly, they're against the nuclear industry generally. They're against this plan specifically, but when you ask them for a better option, for example, which I did, of course, well, they don't have any, most of them at least, they don't have a better option, a better solution. This is not true for all of them. I've met some of them who are engineers, for example, and they do have interesting opinions about that topic. But to answer your question, yes, it's more generally about the nuclear power itself, of course.
They've taken this beyond their own local issues. What is the next stage in this case? What's going to happen next?
Well, the next major phase is in 2018. The French nuclear watchdog will have to give its final say on the project CGO, the deep storage project. If it does give its green light, well, then it's a go, and the project will indeed happen.
Okay, France 24 reporter Jonathan Walsh, thank you very much for speaking to us. Don't forget, of course, you can watch this report and any of our reports on our website, france24.com. That's all from us for now, though. Do stay with France 24. There's more news coming up next.